Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of A Reasonable Price Prediction, the series where we have a track record of not being wrong 100% of the time. And that's an actual fact, guaranteed, because surprisingly, we have got things correct before. Today, we are looking at Stacks, and if you're not sure what Stacks is, it's basically a layer 2 for Bitcoin. So that basically just means faster transactions, NFTs, other things like this, but secured by the Bitcoin network. Very cool stuff. But as usual, we're going to be ignoring the fundamentals of the coin and instead focusing mainly on past performance on the price chart. Now, kicking it off, we'll look at current day, or at least this last year, and we can see there's obviously a lot going on here, a lot of white lines. And if you guys have watched the channel before or have done a little bit of chart analysis yourself, you might be familiar with what's called an Elliot wave. If not, what you're looking at here is basically an Elliot wave. Ignore this blue. Here, these white lines and these yellow lines are an Elliot wave. And an Elliot wave basically says you're going to have 3 legs up, 3 higher highs, followed by a lower high with 2 lower lows. And that's your ABC waves that we can see here. I think this is what's going to play out with Stacks over the short, medium term. And that's not only because just of this initial move that Stacks has made and does seem to be following into the 4th step of the Elliot wave, but if we also go back to sort of previous times, we don't have much data on Stacks, but around the halving time and particularly afterwards, we do kind of see the final step of an Elliot wave play out. However, it is very selective, and of course the data that leads up to it isn't correct, but we do see a move that would support from where we currently are now, which is a few weeks out, about 15, 16 weeks away from the halving, predict a similar move. We have a strong sell-off, which we could see here, followed by a strong move up, which we could see as 4 to 5, and then a pullback down, which we could see as 5 to A, and here we see 5 to A, and then after that it doesn't really work, but we could potentially see this. We might not have the B and C wave. It might just be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B. It might just continue to play out as an Elliot wave in the only trending upwards side, and we might not see this yellow play out much at all, because we didn't see that last cycle. We didn't see it rallying up during the Bullrun year. We didn't really get it when we retraced down. We just had huge sell-offs really, and now we're back to where we were before, give or take, with the Elliot wave starting to take off. So that's just food for thought. Could be something that could play out. Of course it might not. A lot of things are just potentials, and we kind of just have to wait and see. Just for reference, for those of you that can't quite make out the prices, Stacks is currently trading at $1.46. This bull market line here that is indicated ranges from a top of $1.11 to a low of $1.01. So quite a bit of a drop if we're going to go back to the bull market support band, but not all that terrible. It would be a 23% move, which is not impossible for an altcoin like Stacks. We've seen it do, the same thing in similar times. Now this move here, this 80% move down, this of course was the COVID move, but afterwards, the halving, we did see stronger similar moves like a lot of altcoins did during this time, and also during previous halvings. We often see altcoins do well for a short period of time after the Bitcoin halving, followed by a pullback, then followed by a strong move to the upside. And that's usually classed as our bull run, because we have these crazy rallies up on the altcoins and Bitcoin lags behind. And that reflects on the Bitcoin pair as well. We do often see that. Another cool thing to maybe look at, but doesn't really hold too much weight, is this sort of blue arc. Now, it would suggest that it is a counterpoint to this Elliot wave theory. It would suggest that there is more move to Stacks in the short term. It's got a much harsher, much stronger move to the upside due, because it should bounce off here like it has done before. I don't think this will happen. I think it's just more of an indication of the trend it followed on its way up here. It doesn't really mean anything. I would not take this to the bank or put any money on this move. Mind you, I wouldn't put any money really on any move currently, but that's just me. I'm not really into sort of taking short-term bets that much. I much rather play the long game, because in that sense, I'm usually pretty confident the cryptocurrencies I choose will go up in price. Another final thing before we move on to the Bitcoin pair, we can see that before the halving, Stacks puts in a high, which is, funnily enough, its launch price on most exchanges, and then it revisits that high after the halving, and this is indicated with this green line here, this green resistance, And then the second high is this red resistance. We could potentially see something like this play out, as they are similar time frames. Again, this one's probably much further out from the halving, about 20 weeks or so, probably longer. Much longer actually, I'd say like 35 or something. And this guy's only like 15 or 20 or so. So it might not be exactly that, it might not play out at all, but if it does, we could expect another revisit to this high sometime around Q3 of 2024, which isn't unreasonable, especially if this Elliot wave is to be believed or have any weight put into it. We could see potentially our fifth move up end up somewhere around this red resistance line at a similar height here. So in general, there's a lot of generally long-term bullish and medium-term bullish things for stacks, and we will most likely return to this high. In terms of where I think stacks can go during the next bull run, its last all-time high was $3.30, so we already are quite high up to our all-time high. We're about a 2x away, and to me that suggests that it's quite a bullish crypto to hold, and the fact that stacks rallied through 2023 and had some severe pullbacks, yes, but it rallied with the September, October, November sort of moves where Solana and Avalanche picked up, but it also rallied at the beginning of 2023, like a lot of altcoins to be fair, but it had an extreme rally and it had a pullback, but it ultimately ended up the year about 650% up from its low, which is very good for an altcoin during this time. Now I know Solana has outperformed it, but Solana outperformed it in a much shorter period of time, which again is more impressive, but it just shows that it was that one catalyst that sent it skyrocketing. Stacks has its average price, its true value perhaps, has slowly trended up throughout the year at a nice pace, and this is usually a healthy sign for an altcoin, especially when it's sort of pre-halving year when not much is expected from the alts. So what I expect from this year, I'd say we will probably come back to our all-time high during 2024. I think this Elliot wave sort of plays that pattern out in a nice way. It shows that we could potentially come back up. These moves also are of similar percentage. I made sure to get similar moves. So here we see a 63% up, and from our last peak to our second peak, we see a similar move. It is bang on, I've just measured inaccurately here. They are the same, and it's the same with these moves from our lows to these lows as well, and to this one. Not this one, sorry, but for the Elliot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So potentially we could have stacks coming up to $3.20, the all-time high, sometime after the halving. I think this is likely, or we could see it come to a $2.10 level. I also think this is likely. I do think that we will visit the $3.20 during 2024. In terms of 2025, I wouldn't put stacks any higher than $15. I think, if you're buying stacks now, not that you're late, but you're missing out from where your huge gains could have been, which would have been 23 cents. And if you're buying loads of stacks at 23 cents and then selling them at $15, you're getting like a 70x, give or take, roughly, I think, if I've done that right. Which is what I think we'll probably see stacks do, something crazy like this, but the majority of people have missed that option. And if you're buying now, you're probably getting a 10x, which is still quite nice, but that's if you sell at the top. And there's no guarantee that it does, of course, go to $15. It might go to 10, it might go to 7, it could go anywhere. There's no way for me of knowing. But I do know if we break above this all-time high during the halving year, we are much likely to see huge gains, much bigger gains in fact, during 2025, because there's no mental resistance left for stacks to break through. This is the big one that we need to look out for, the $3.30. Moving to the Bitcoin pair, we can see quite an interesting one. Stacks has kind of stayed within a range with a lot of altcoins. We often see huge long periods of trending down followed by quick, short, powerful bursts to the upside. And while Stacks does have these quick, short, powerful bursts to the upside, its downward trends don't seem to be as long as the rest of the crypto spaces. It looks more like a radio frequency than kind of anything else really. We have, of course, our halving dates pointed out, or our halving weeks anyway. This one's May 11th, and this one is due sometime in April after the 20th. I think the date is 23rd or 24th. I'm not quite sure. I will check that again. It's not really too important. And, until we know the exact date, which I don't think we do yet, it doesn't really matter whether I'm a day off or a day on. On the weekly chart, it holds the same. One thing interesting that potentially could be playing out with stacks is these highs that we keep visiting on the Bitcoin pair, excuse me. This 4,000 Satoshi level seems to hold a lot of resistance for stacks, and we can see it barely ever breaks out of it. The only time it really broke above was late 2021 when stacks really performed well, and we saw it reach a high of 6,860 sats, which is really impressive for a small cap altcoin like it was at the time, but of course it did grow quite a lot. But we see these 4,000 sats is a continuous resistance that stacks has a hard time breaking through. What we could potentially be seeing is some sort of a potential pattern. Now, we don't have much data before the halving, but we can see during a similar time frame, stacks entered this 4,000 Satoshi resistance level. It's where it launched, more or less, and now we have returned to a similar price, the 4,000 sat level, during a similar time from the halving. What happened after that? We did not return to our 4,000 sats until the bull run. So basically stacks didn't do well on its Bitcoin pair up until, well, basically Q2 of the, well, Q1, late Q1 of the bull run year. So that could potentially put us at, you know, like February time of 2025 when we see stacks to start make a move. And when it does kind of, like we said, it has these strong green candles to the upside. That's explosive. So that could happen potentially. I have no way of knowing. You see, I've labeled these 1, 2, and 3, and of course this guy's 2 to correlate to 2, and this guy's 3 here to correlate to the price action that we potentially could see later on. I drew a 1 here because potentially next cycle we might see a U play out again, but there's no guarantee of that at all. I do think, however, this 4,000 sat level will be a reoccurring resistance for stacks far down the road, in my opinion. Another little thing that I noticed was that stacks has put in a low, or put in its all-time low, in fact, just before the halving, last halving back in 2020. And if we take a look here, it also put in a cycle low, give or take. Not really considering this, but from this high it put in a low, which is also very close to the halving in terms of date-wise. And then after the halving, it did return to these levels. So roughly 4 months, 5 months away from the halving. I know this is a much closer time frame. This is only about 3 months, 4 months. So again, there's some discrepancies, but it could just be something that might play out. Again, the 4-year cycle realistically isn't 4 years exactly. There is some variation in time. That's why we still don't know the exact dates for the Bitcoin halving. It depends on the blocks and how quickly they're mined. And while that is sort of a constant, it also isn't, and that's quite complicated. But if you're interested in that, go check out the network hash rate of Bitcoin on YouTube. I'm sure there's some great videos that can explain how the difficulty is balanced with the hash rate. But those are kind of the few things that I wanted to point out with stacks again on its all-time high, where I think it will go on its Bitcoin pair. I think we will return to this low, or at least close to it. And then once we do that, we will probably most likely have our strong moves to the upside on this Bitcoin pair. Again, this is not unusual for altcoins to see these strong moves up and strong moves down on their Bitcoin pairs almost immediately after the halving. So just be aware of this volatility. I don't know any exchanges that offer stacks Bitcoin futures, but if for whatever reason you were planning on trading that, always be aware of this. It's the same with most other altcoins. So even if you're looking at something like Avalanche or Filecoin or Solana, most of them see this huge retracement back to these lows that they saw during the halving. So just be aware, just be aware. Anyway, I think that about wraps up the video. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Consider signing up to FairDesk with the link in the description. Not only do you get a deposit, but you also get reduced trading fees, and it really helps out the channel. We get a little kickback from the trading volume that you generate. But if you don't want to, no pressure, of course. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Take care and peace.